The sun was sinking low behind the dusty hills when the old rancher rode slowly down the narrow dirt road that led back to his small, quiet ranch. The sky burned orange and gold, and the wind carried the dry smell of the plains. It had been another long day, just like every other day in his lonely life. But before this story continues, take a second and make sure you like this video, share it with someone who believes kindness still exists in this world, and subscribe to the channel so you never miss stories that can touch your heart. Because what happened to this rancher on that quiet evening would change his life forever. For years, people in the nearby towns simply called him the Lonely Rancher. His real name was Daniel Carter, but hardly anyone remembered it anymore. He lived alone on a worn-down ranch far outside the town limits. His house was small, his barn was old, and the wooden fence around his land creaked every time the wind passed through. Daniel had once lived a very different life. Many years ago, the ranch had been full of laughter. His wife, Maria, used to sing while cooking in the kitchen. His little boy would run across the fields chasing chickens and laughing loudly enough for the whole valley to hear. But time can be cruel. An illness had taken Maria suddenly, and only 2 years later, an accident had taken his son. After that, the ranch grew quiet. Daniel stopped going to town unless he absolutely had to. He worked the land alone, fixed his fences alone, and ate his meals alone. The silence around him became his only companion. That evening, as he rode home on his old horse Rusty, he noticed something strange near the edge of his property. At first, he thought they were stray animals. But as he got closer, he saw 2 small figures sitting near the wooden fence. 2 children, a boy and a girl. They looked thin, their clothes dusty and worn, like they had walked a very long way. The girl was holding a small paper bag tightly in her hands. Daniel frowned. Strangers rarely came this far out. He slowly climbed down from his horse and walked toward them. "Hey there," he said cautiously. "You kids lost?" The boy immediately stood up, stepping protectively in front of the girl. "We're not stealing anything, mister," the boy said quickly. "We promise." Daniel blinked in surprise. "I didn't say you were," he replied. The little girl looked up at him with wide, worried eyes. She hugged the paper bag closer to her chest. Then she said something that stopped the rancher cold. "Please, don't take our food," she whispered. "We saved all day for this." Her voice trembled. Daniel's heart tightened. He looked down at the small bag in her hands. Inside were only a few pieces of bread and what looked like 2 apples. "That was it. That's all you have?" Daniel asked gently. The boy nodded. "We worked at the market," he said quietly, "carrying boxes and cleaning trash. People gave us food instead of money." The rancher felt something heavy settle in his chest. "How long have you been out here?" he asked. "Since morning," the boy said. "And where are your parents?" The children looked at each other. The girl's eyes slowly dropped to the ground. "We don't have any," she said softly. The wind blew across the field, rattling the old fence. Daniel suddenly felt the same pain he had buried years ago begin to rise in his heart again. Loneliness. Loss. He studied the children carefully. They weren't criminals. They weren't troublemakers. They were just hungry, tired, and scared. He rubbed the back of his neck and sighed. "Well," he said after a moment, "you 2 can't sit out here all night." The boy immediately stiffened. "We're not leaving," he said quickly. "This spot is good. We won't bother you." Daniel almost smiled at how fiercely the boy was trying to protect his sister. "I'm not kicking you out," the rancher said calmly. He pointed toward the house in the distance. "I'm offering dinner." The children hesitated. The girl whispered something to her brother. Finally, the boy looked back at Daniel carefully. Why? It was a fair question. Daniel hadn't invited anyone into his home in years. But when he looked at those 2 small faces, he remembered his son. And he remembered the promise he had once made to always help those who needed it. "No kid should go hungry," he said simply. Slowly, the boy nodded. A few minutes later, the rancher led them toward his house. The inside of the home was simple but warm. The wooden floors creaked, and an old clock ticked quietly on the wall. The smell of cooking soon filled the air. Daniel made stew, fresh bread, and warm milk. When he placed the bowls in front of the children, they stared at the food like they couldn't believe it was real. "Go on," Daniel said. They didn't need to be told twice. They ate carefully at first, then faster. But the girl suddenly paused halfway through her bowl. She quietly slid half of the bread back into the paper bag. Daniel noticed. "You don't like it?" he asked. Her eyes widened. "No. It's amazing." Then why save it? She hesitated. Then she whispered, for tomorrow. Daniel felt his throat tighten. That moment broke something inside the lonely rancher. These children were planning meals one day at a time, because they didn't know when the next one would come. He stood up slowly and walked to the window, staring out at the dark fields. For years he had lived alone in silence. But suddenly the house didn't feel so empty anymore. If this story is touching your heart so far, take a moment right now to like this video, share it with someone who believes kindness can change lives, and subscribe to the channel for more powerful real-life stories. Because what happened next would change all three of their lives. Later that night, the children sat quietly by the fireplace. Daniel brought them warm blankets. "Where were you planning to sleep tonight?" he asked. The boy shrugged. "Anywhere dry." The rancher shook his head slowly. "You'll stay here tonight." The girl looked up at him. "Really?" "Yes." She smiled for the first time. And that small smile warmed the old rancher's heart more than anything he had felt in years. Over the next few days, the children helped around the ranch. The boy learned how to feed the chickens and repair fences. The girl helped cook and laughed when the flour covered the kitchen table. Something strange began happening to Daniel. He started waking up earlier. He started smiling again. The ranch that had once been silent slowly filled with life again. Laughter echoed across the fields where only wind had been heard before. One evening, as they all sat watching the sunset, the girl asked a question. "Mr. Daniel, are we going to leave soon?" The rancher looked at the horizon. For a long moment, he didn't speak. Then he said quietly, "Do you want to?" Both children shook their heads quickly. The boy spoke carefully. "This place feels like home." Daniel's eyes filled with tears he hadn't allowed himself to shed in years. "Well," he said slowly, "then maybe you should stay." The girl gasped. "Forever?" Daniel smiled. "Forever." From that day forward, the lonely rancher wasn't lonely anymore. The ranch that had once been a place of silence became a home again. Not because life had been easy, but because kindness had changed everything. And sometimes, the smallest voices, like a little girl whispering, "Please don't take our food, we saved all day for this," can break even the hardest heart. If this story moved you, don't forget to like this video, share it with your friends and family, and subscribe to the channel for more stories that remind us how powerful compassion truly is. Because somewhere out there today, someone might be waiting for the same kindness that changed 3 lives on a quiet ranch.